the search for meaning and limiting beliefs, and they connect in a very interesting way that is negative for a lot of us. And I want to touch on this here in the next couple of minutes. I just rewatched a video by Dr. Arthur Brooks. It's a 5-minute video. It's called "You Need to Be Bored. Here is How." You can find it on YouTube. It has more than 16 million views at this time, I think, and it's less than a year old. I watched it several months ago, and I just rewatched it now because it popped up in my screen. And the message of the video is very simple. You need to set aside your distractions for 15 minutes a day, your phone, smartphone, whatever your immediate distractions are, because that will put you in a state where you activate your default mode network. This is the areas of the brain that help us turn in. This is the rumination network. It's the house of our what's called the ego. And that is great because in such states, we get access to bigger questions of life that many of us are passively or actively avoiding because we don't have answers to these questions, like the question of what's the meaning of my life. It's a heavy question for a lot of us, especially those who are beginning to transition from conventional to post-conventional stages. I'm referring to the ego development theory by Susanne Cook-Greuter. I've talked about that in previous videos. So yes, it's very important that we set aside our distractions every single day. And it's very hard for a lot of us, or even most of us in the contemporary world. Why? Because we get into this state of rumination and we eventually access these heavy questions of our human existence and human condition that are just heavy to sit with. But this also reminded me that when we activate the default mode network and we enter this rumination palace of mind or room of mind, what happens more often is we don't go to the big questions of life, like the question of meaning. We go to what's not working well in our lives. And this is very important because this is how we emphasize what's called limiting beliefs, or beliefs that are not serving us. And the unfortunate reality is that we don't experience the world the way the world is. We experience the world the way we expect it to be. In other words, our brain does not show us reality the way it is, but it shows us reality the way it expects it to be. And the expectation is built on its priors or prior beliefs. That's how they're called in cognitive neuroscience. Belief equals prior. And in my vocabulary, expectation and belief is the same thing. So the brain constantly expects what reality should be like, and it constructs it based on its prior experiences and expectations. So we don't experience the world the way the world is. We experience the world the way we believe it to be, each one of us. And the other starking fact is that we hold our beliefs as if they're facts, and they're not facts. They're just opinions that have hardened to the degree that for us it feels like facts. So where am I holding these two together? Yes, it's important to activate our default mode network so that we have access to these bigger existential questions, because it's a part of our personal evolution, at least for a lot of us. 20% of the population, according to Susanne Cook-Greuter, will eventually go through the stages from conventional to post-conventional. 80% won't. But those of us who will graduate, we need that time. We need to contemplate. But the problem is that when we have the time to ruminate, and we've made that opportunity during the day, where our mind usually goes to is not our questions of our existence and meaning of life. It goes to what's not going well. And there is a evolutionary reason for that. Our brains have evolved to pick out the negative stuff because it's very important for survival. That's the only reason, by the way. But what that means is that when we have time to ruminate, we go towards what didn't go well, and we keep emphasizing that, and we completely discard any evidence that supports the opposite. In other words, what's going well in our lives in very particular areas of life. That's how we form limiting beliefs, and that's how we strengthen them. So I can give you an example in my own personal life. I recently turned 52, and I've noticed that in the last year, from even a year and a half, from 50 to 51, 52 now, every time I notice beautiful women out on the street, I notice that my mind goes immediately to, well, you're 52, you're old. And I've fortunately trained myself to notice this now. And I have plenty of evidence that 52 is not old. I personally receive compliments all the time that I don't look 52, I don't perform like 52. I have my own set of evidence from my performance in gym and so on. And the brain tends to discard these when I have time to sit with my thoughts, when I go in, when I ruminate. It tends to completely obscure the evidence that I'm not old, and it keeps showing me more of the facts that I am old. And that's the main one. I am 52. Now, somebody might be 42 and they may be living in a world where they're very old at that point. And I think it happens to a lot of people. And there are also people who are 62 and 72 and they don't feel old at all. So where is the truth? And the answer is, the truth is in the belief, in the prior, in the expectation. And so what am I trying to say here? Default mode network, when we remove all the distractions, it may go towards asking these bigger questions of life, the questions of meaning. And these are important and these are heavy. And that's a whole separate topic. However, where it might go, and that's more probable, it is towards ways in which something in our life didn't go well, and we ruminate more on that. Now, I'm presenting a challenge here, and I'm not presenting a solution, right? I will try to present a solution. In my experience, the way to be able to catch that so that it doesn't go on autopilot, where the brain just, every time it gets a chance to sit more in that default mode network and ruminate, instead of spending incessant time in finding more evidence why the things that suck in your life are your actual reality and why this should continue to be your actual reality. In other words, keeps affirming your limitations. The way to interrupt that is, in my book, step number one, which is the most important step, is to realize that when you ruminate on something that's unhealthy for you and it's emphasizing a limiting belief, it just doesn't feel good. That's the main evidence. And so to connect it to my personal example, when I am out and about and I have that thought of, well, you're 52, you're old, it doesn't feel good. And that's what I typically use to snap out of it. It just doesn't feel good. Thinking about empowering things, which happens much more rarely than thinking about disempowering things. Thinking about empowering things feels good. Thinking about disempowering things and their evidence feels not good. And so that's the main key to it, to snap out of it, to shift out of something that's not healthy for you if you stay longer with it. because it emphasizes the evidence for something you don't want in your life. And then if you continue with that evidence, since your brain is showing you the world the way it expects it to be and not the way it is, that becomes your world. This is how the brain works. So I'm just sharing something with you that I think is important to keep in mind when we talk about finding our own individual answers to the question of why am I here and what's the meaning of life? What might happen instead of going to these questions and how to snap ourselves out of it.